Vinnie Mac has had a lot of memorable feuds over the years. McMahon vs Austin, McMahon vs Bret Hart, McMahon vs the federal government. The list goes on and on. That said, I don't think any of these beefs were as wild as the one he went through in 2006. The one which involved Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and at one point, God himself. Yes, you heard that right. This was the year the Almighty himself, not Bobby Lashley, but God made his in-ring WWE debut. What level of work rate did he show once the bell rang? And what after effects did this lead to when it came to the rest of the year? There's only one way to tell the story properly, and to do so, we have to start at the beginning. WrestleMania 22. This was the event where for the first time in history, the boss went one-on-one with Shawn Michaels. Why was Vince suddenly so desperate to fight HBK on the grandest stage of them all? Well, because in the months prior, the two started taking jabs at each other more and more frequently over the events of the Montreal Screwjob 2 decades prior. With this all beginning when McMahon tried to put his employee in his place by reminding him that he could screw him out of a job anytime that he wanted, just like he done with Bret Hart back in 1997. Obviously, Shawn didn't take too kindly to this, and he got even more upset when, following a surprise attack from Shane and Vince trying to make Marty Jannetty kiss his ass, he was laid out and was forced to join the ever-prestigious Vince McMahon Kiss My Ass Club. Then, as if that wasn't bad enough, Vince came out the next week on Raw and gave an Oscars-style speech, saying that the Oscars is just 3 hours of ass kissing, but it pales in comparison to HBK kissing his ass. He started to thank Shawn for kissing his ass, and thanked everyone involved in making HBK's life hell. HBK's music hit, and the McMahons and the security got distracted, looking at the ramp waiting for him. But little did they know, HBK wasn't coming down the ramp. The security jumped him. Vince told him that he had a match the same night with Shane. When everyone got backstage, Shawn was in the locker room livid, and things got even worse as Stephanie showed up. She made him feel sorry for her by playing the pregnant card, and said that she was sorry for everything that was happening. Shawn stupidly falls for the trap, and as he goes to get her some water, Steph spikes Shawn's drink, setting him up for disaster. When HBK got to the ring, he could hardly stand up on his own 2 feet, and Shane put an absolute beating on him, beating him easily. But this wasn't the only result of Shawn getting spiked. Vince set this all up, and decided to set up a public drug test for HBK. After being called a junkie multiple times, HBK pisses in the cup, and Vince just keeps mocking him, and decided to hand the mic to HBK before the test results were announced. Shawn said there was an old saying, "It's better to be pissed off than pissed on," and he threw the cup of piss right onto him. Later that night, Shawn faced off against the Spirit Squad in a steel cage match, and the Spirit Squad won the match by pinning Shawn. But of course they weren't done there. Shane interfered and slammed the cage door onto him, busted him open, and then gave him a coast-to-coast to rub even more salt in the wound. It came to Saturday night's main event, where Shawn would face Shane again but in a street fight. And Shawn could finally get some revenge on Shane, superplexing him off a ladder and through 2 tables. Shane did hit HBK with some brutal ladder shots, which put a smile on the face of Vince. However, HBK powered through, and as Shane went for a coast-to-coast with Vince holding a trash can over Shawn's face, he got out of the way, causing it to hit Vince. But eventually, we got another screwjob finish, with Shane locking in the sharpshooter and Vince ringing the bell. So by the time Mania came around on April 2nd, tensions were at a boiling point. So much so that things could only be settled in a no-holds-barred match. Of course, there was no way the boss was ever going to win this one though. After all, he had all the athleticism of a darts player with 1 leg. And for that reason, it shouldn't come as a surprise he ended up getting absolutely brutalised by the Heartbreak Kid here, with Shawn at one point even stuffing his boss's head into a trash can and then elbow dropping him through a table. But while this may have been a major embarrassment for the owner of the WWE, he wasn't willing to retreat into that good night quite yet. No, he wanted revenge, and so that was why after Mania, the feud would continue, though at this point, it would take on a far more surreal tone. How did this surrealness first present itself? 1 word: McMahonism. Yes, given the fact that his rival Shawn Michaels had by then transformed himself from noted 90s douchebag into born-again Christian, an overall decent human being, the boss felt the best way to get inside his head was to go down the sacrilegious route, and that meant creating his own religion, one which saw him sat at the top of the throne. But we probably should have seen this coming, because no one has ever accused Vinnie Mac of not having an ego the size of a planet, have they? And there's certainly a history of him having hostility with the Man in the Sky, which can be seen in the pre-match segment he had prior to the WrestleMania bout. The one which saw Vince, Linda, Shane, and a heavily pregnant Stephanie all lower to their knees in prayer. Well, we say prayer, though in truth it was more of an angry promo on God. So when Vince announced the birth of McMahonism, it made all the sense in the world. And it also made all the sense in the world that the match would kick this off. That's right, at Backlash on April 30th, it would be a tag team bout, pitting Vince and Shane against Shawn Michaels and God. And this is where the whole thing went truly buck wild. Because in the build-up to the match, the father-son duo filmed a segment from inside a local church, where after trying to use his credit card on the collection plate, then doing the Triple H bit with some holy water, the boss called out the Almighty. Presumably though, God was too busy with admin that day, so he couldn't show up to answer the challenge. Something which caused the WWE CEO to pull out his personal Bible in the form of an 8x10 photo of himself, and he read out his own 10 commandments for all to hear. Then, in a moment which deserves to be clipped and put on permanent display, Vince had his son read out a psalm, which included the line, "Vince McMahon, whose mighty grapefruits produced the life-giving semen that spawned me." And after that, both men hit the dais, where Vince asked God one more time to strike him down, something which caused Shane to shuffle away quietly. But one person who wasn't laughing was Shawn Michaels. No, he wanted nothing more than to annihilate his employer for making a mockery of his religion. Lucky for him, he'd get a chance to do this at the pay-per-view. But before he got his hands on the McMahons, he had to first endure further goading, as once Vince and Shane came out to the ring that night, the boss grabbed Lillian Garcia's microphone and personally announced God down to the ring. Would God actually make his date this time? Well, yes and no, because at that point, a spotlight shone onto the entrance ramp and followed what we were all left to assume was the Supreme Being coming down to the ring itself. And after Shawn entered next and was forced to watch as Vince made the referee check the Lord Almighty for foreign objects, and asking him to get jiggy with it and dance a little, it was finally time for things to start. No prizes for guessing that this was effectively a handicap match then, as presumably taking the Hulk Hogan attitude of, "We've already got their money, brother." God spent the entirety of the match standing on the apron refusing to tag in, letting his partner do all the work for him. And that meant for as good as HBK was, even he couldn't overcome the combined efforts of not only Vince and Shane, but also numerous interferences from the Spirit Squad, with all this leading to him ultimately eating a pinfall from the boss in 19 minutes and 57 seconds. But while this marked the end of God's arranged dates with the WWE for that year, he was on the Goldberg schedule after all. It didn't mark the end of the feud entirely, because for the next few months Vince would continue to battle it out with Shawn, but this time, HBK would have a more corporal form of backup going forward, as on the June 12th episode of Raw, he reunited with his old buddy Triple H, and from there the two reformed D-Generation X for the first time in almost 2 decades. And after proving themselves to be the PG little stinkers they were, by dousing Vince, Shane and the Spirit Squad with poo, it would eventually lead to another tag team showdown at August 20th SummerSlam, one which saw Vince and Shane go up against Shawn and Triple H in a tag team contest. How would Vince and Shane fare now that the odds were evened? Better than you might expect. Well, because the odds weren't exactly evened. Throughout the bout, there were run-ins galore from the likes of the Spirit Squad, The Big Show, Finlay, William Regal, Mr. Kennedy, and Umaga. In the end, however, even this wasn't enough to see the heels reign victory, because after Kane came out towards the end of the bout to help even the odds for the babyfaces, HBK was able to hit sweet chin music on Vince, sending him directly into a pedigree from his son-in-law, and from there Triple H pinned him for the victory at 13 minutes and 1 second. So with all settled and the good guys standing tall, you'd think things were finally over. Well, you'd be wrong if you thought this, Because never one to admit defeat, the boss decided to pull one more ace from up his sleeve. When he announced that at Unforgiven, it'd be D-Generation X taking part in a handicap match against Vince, Shane, and The Big Show. And adding a little bit of more spice, this one would be held in a Hell in a Cell, meaning there was no opportunity for someone like Kane to interfere. But this also meant that there could be no interference from the likes of the Spirit Squad or Umaga either, something that Vince obviously didn't think about ahead of time. But DX were aware of this, and now more confident than ever, despite the fact that they'd be outnumbered once the time came for the bell to ring. They spent the weeks leading up to the bout getting into the boss's head, by doing things like ripping the rear axle off his limousine, and spray painting their symbol over both his private jet and the WWE HQ. And that meant when Unforgiven finally came, it was clear things had to end one way or another, as there was simply no longer enough room in WWE to hold both the McMahons and DX. Luckily then, there'd be a very definitive winner here, because after Vince was forced to endure the ultimate embarrassment of having his head rammed up the arse of a 500-pound man, he was hit with a Sweet Chin Music sledgehammer strike combo, with this being what put him down for the 3 count and sent him back to his corporate duties off screen for a while. And so, like that ended the saga of 2006 Vince McMahon. One of the most bizarre years for a man filled with seemingly nothing but bizarre years. But we can't exactly say we hated it, because this one had everything you could possibly want. Whether that be classic 90s stable reunions, elderly men getting their heads shoved up the ass of Paul White, or God himself taking part in his first and to date only sanctioned WWE bout. Sure, the Almighty may have lost this one, but given the recent developments that have taken place with Vinnie Mac, we think it's safe to say the man upstairs got his win back in the end. The only question left is, will we ever get that rubber match between the pair? WrestleMania 50 live from the Kingdom of Heaven, anyone? Well, I'm in. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, click here for another, and if you want to become a dog yourself, check the links in the description.